My name is Roger Ballen. I'm a photographic artist living in Johannesburg, South Africa. For the past 6 years, I've been working on a project, Asylum of the Birds. I'm fascinated by birds. They link the heavens to the earth.
For Revolart.it, I'm Giuseppe Origo. I'm luckily here with Mr. Roger Ballen in Johannesburg. I'm so proud to be here with you, and thank you very much for accepting our interview.
Great pleasure.
Thank you very much. Just a few questions about your work. The first is that in your work as an artist, in regard to all your portraits, it seems that you focused more on a psychological aspect than an aesthetic one. Could you please explain us the relationship between aesthetics and psychological study in your pictures?
Well, this is a good question. I think the issue is that the aesthetic is psychological. So it's not that the work isn't aesthetic, the work is psychologically aesthetic.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important differentiation to make. If the work has a lasting value to it, if the work continues to give people impact, then it has some sort of, has an aesthetic that affects their mind one way or another. So one can't necessarily differentiate the psychological from the aesthetic in the work.
Why you use only black and white? Why no colors?
I'm the last generation to have grown up in a black and white world. It's hard to differentiate my work from the fact that they're in black and white. The relationship, the formal relationship is inseparable. I mean, on a more specific basis, I like the fact that black and white is a very pure, very condensed, a very formally abstracted, very formally pure and abstract at the same time. So the issue is that I actually don't have any interest in color photography. I like color painting. I find color photography in a way a bit fake. Why? Why do I feel it's fake? Because in photography, the colors somehow convey the concept of reality. People say, well, this is the way it is, this is the way it looks like. But what they're looking at is photographic color. So and I feel there's like a cognitive dissonance taking place between the work and the mind of the viewer, that what they see is actually not the way it is.
Thank you very much. The third question is about this city. This is like a strange city for me that I've never come here. And I want to know from you, what is Johannesburg today and who inhabits it?
Well, I guess in a way, the Johannesburg reflects the dynamics of the country, maybe better than any other place in South Africa. Well, what are the dynamics of South Africa? Well, the biggest dynamic is that huge cultural, economic, class differences here. And what exists now isn't really much different than it was 50 years ago during the apartheid period. There were always these huge differences between the haves and have-nots. And there was always this huge cultural differences here between the so-called European culture, the Western culture, and the African culture. And so this is really, I think, a real defining edge for this country. And I think on top of that, what's occurred since the fall of apartheid here is you get this global culture that's come in here and transformed the way people see themselves and see where they'd like to go with their future. So you have this added ingredient, if you want to say, that that also transforms what we have here. So ultimately, you have a link between the global culture, the Apple, the iPod, the car culture, the European culture, which is tied to the international culture plus the colonial culture. And then you have the African culture, which is also divided up between the middle class and the elite that run the country, and the preponderance of people who are poor and traditional in their own way.
And why did you choose Johannesburg to live in?
Well, I guess for a number of reasons. I first came here in 1974 as a young man. I hitchhiked from Cairo to Cape Town, and then I spent about a year or two here. And then I made an overland trip from Istanbul to New Guinea, which took me a couple of years. I went back to America in the late 70s and did a PhD in geology.
Yeah.
And I practiced, I came back here firstly, well, I guess for three reasons perhaps. One, it was a good place to do geological work. South Africa is like the Saudi Arabia of minerals in the world. Two, I found a really interesting place because of the dichotomy that I found here when I first came here between the first world, the colonial world, and the African third world. I found this very interesting, this dynamic. One could live like in America or in the first world, but also be involved in a third world situation, which was quite inspiring to me at the time. And I met my future wife on my first visit, who was from Johannesburg. And then when after I did my PhD, I got an interesting job here, so that's what brought me here. Again, in 1982, I came here permanently in 1982.
And for an artist, what is this city?
Yeah, look, it's really hard to say because, I can't get in anybody's mind.
Yeah.
It's really hard to understand what motivates anybody, and hundreds of people that consider themselves artists, from people who paint pictures of flowers, pretty flowers, to people who walk around the city and try to paint or photograph people in desperate situations, and people who write about the country, and sometimes in a fictional way and sometimes in a factual way. So it really is always difficult to know what motivates people. I think, for me, an artist is about trying to define your life. It's a way of expressing your identity in one way or another. Some people like to express their identity through political reflection and political expressions, and others, like myself, are interested in the more psychological, philosophical basis of human existence.
What kind of relationship exists between you and the subject you capture in your portraits?
Well, the first thing is the relationship has always been very good. You couldn't work in the places that I worked in for the last 30 years without having a good relationship. It'd be absolutely impossible. The places that I work in are quite dangerous. There are people that are on the street, people who have money, people who are trying to survive, people met people who are murdered other people, So if you don't have a good relationship, you can't get along with them, then, well, you can't do the projects that I'm doing. So the relationship I've always seen is a two-way street. I've tried to help the people as best as I can as one human being, and they enjoy being around me in some way or another. So, it's always been a mutual relationship, and I can say to this day that I have hundreds and hundreds of people who contact me regularly and ask me about what I'm doing, when I'm coming to see them again. The people that I work with really like me, and I really like the people I work with, and that's why I continue to do this, because I have an affinity to people, to the type of people that I work with.
Why you choose and you continue to present to your audience this creepy aesthetic?
Well, the thing is you really can't answer the question, because people, it's like saying, why do you like the color red or blue or purple? It's part of who I am. And if you go back many years, this is why it's quite interesting for me right now when I'm doing this retrospective book. And I can see from the time I was in my late teens to early 20s that I was involved with these type of people somehow or another. So it's just part of my identity, part of my essence. It's hard for me to say, why I'm attracted to them in some way or another. But, it's really, really crucial to understand this, and I think a lot of people don't understand this aspect of photography. Anybody can walk anywhere in the world, whether it's Rome, whether it's Milan, whether it's New York, whether it's Johannesburg, and find interesting subjects that look like some of my subjects in some way or another. And I've always told other people that finding this subject, you're only like 5% there. You're not 95% there, you're 5% there. So now you have a subject, you found somebody, oh, this person looks interesting. So what are you going to do with them now? What are you going to do with them? So, it's like saying, okay, I think this is a beautiful sunset, or this is a beautiful mountain, or this smells nice, and then to write a great work of poetry or philosophy. I mean, there's a big difference between finding something that it has those attributes and transforming it into an aesthetic object that has some long-term value. It's a huge difference.
This is your last work, published in 2014,
yes,
Asylum of the Birds, and the leitmotif are the birds.
Yeah.
You are not the first artist, of course, who talk about the birds. It's maybe too easy to talk about Alfred Hitchcock, but Alfred Hitchcock was ornithophobic and he was afraid by birds. You said you got another kind of relation with birds, because you said you admire birds. Could you please speak us about Asylum of the Birds and your relation with those animals?
Well, look, I think I like anything in nature, so I have pet snakes, pet spiders.
Yes.
So a lot of the things that people don't like, I like everything. So there's nothing I don't really like. I really have an affinity to everything in the natural world. So, I think I used birds as a metaphor. If you go back to the Bible, or even before the Bible, the birds have a very archetypal metaphor. They're heavenly. There's some signs of pureness. They link the heavens to the earth. So there's something archetypal about them. And wherever you go in the world, the archetype's more or less the same. They represent something about the heavens. And so what I try to do in this book is link the heavens, the symbol of the heavens, the bird, with the Roger Ballen world, with the Roger Ballen space, with the Roger Ballen aesthetic, and link them in some way through the transformation of the camera. And I created another aesthetic through this link, through this relationship between the metaphor of the birds and the metaphor of the Roger Ballen space. And that's the essence of the work, to try to understand that metaphor. That metaphor, well, first of all, these pictures are a little different, but one should dig deeply and try to understand that metaphor for yourself. There's multiple metaphors, but the metaphor might be quite clear if one ponders it.
The last question. There's a thing I'd like to ask to you. If you look in the mirror at yourself, what do you see?
Well, it's a good question, because I do this every morning and quite a lot during the day because I want to go to the men's room or whatever. Well, I think there's two things that I see, two things that go through my mind. One is this really me? Because the mirror isn't necessarily a reflection of you. It's based on the physics of a mirror. So what you look at isn't necessarily you, it's the physics of the mirror and the physics of the mind, or the biology of the mind. The second thing that I guess I'm always pondering is when I look at myself. I'm 65 right now, and I'm pondering that I'm getting older every day, and the signs of age are creeping on me, and I need to understand that and be focused on the things that are important to me in life right now.
Thank you very much, Roger. It was really a pleasure and an honor for me to meet you.
And pleasure here for me.
Really, really, really interesting to see your words. This is Giuseppe Origo with Roger Ballen for Revolart.it. Ciao.
Archetypal symbols from the deeper levels of the human subconscious pervade my photographs. This place is untamable. It has its own rules and functions according to its own laws. When I create photographs, I often travel deep into my own interior, place where dreams and many of my images originate. I see my photographs as mirrors, reflectors, connectors that challenge the mind.